Everybody ready? Good morning, everyone. We're going to reconvene an open session. Welcome to our January 15, 2019 Board of County Commissioners meeting. Right on time, a few minutes early, so thank you for everyone. I'd like to begin the meeting with our commissioners' reports and comments. Vice President Baker, would you begin, please?
Just two things. Parks and Rec meeting met this past week, and they discussed a little bit of the POS funding request that would be coming forward here in the next month or two from all of the various municipalities. I believe all of the information has been sent out to the municipalities. So they're looking forward to discussing those requests. And then also they elected a new president to replace Greg Shank, who had passed away here a little while back. So Brad Trich is tentatively acting as the president of the Parks and Rec Board. And I think they're reaching out to the attorneys to check on some things to make sure that he's permitted to accept that responsibility as to lead the Parks and Rec group. Also had a discussion on diversity last evening and talked a little bit about the possibility of an upcoming diversity fair, and it's going to involve many facets of our community, many of our diverse groups, and some more information will be coming forward on that in the near future. And if any of the commissioners have any thoughts on what we could include in that diversity fair, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Kiefer, would you like to?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that yesterday several of us had an opportunity to speak with the governor's special secretary for smart growth, I believe is her title, Wendy Peters. Is that correct? I believe so. To talk about opportunity zones in the state of Maryland, and that's part of a larger federal program that could prove beneficial for us here in Washington County. Included in that meeting was some members from the Department of Commerce, a couple representatives from our municipalities in Washington County, and staff to get us updated on opportunity zones. So hopefully that's something that we'll take under advisement and make some decisions when here before long how we want to proceed to get the word out. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wagner.
Well, excited to start a pretty good year here. We're going to have a lot of requests coming up, and address this to my fellow commissioners. We're going to have huge requests from the Washington County Public School System, fire rescue, economic development, and infrastructure. All goes hand in hand. I think we're all going to be we're tasked with fiscal responsibility to spend the taxpayers' money. I think that in my opinion, those are all top priorities for me, along with a lot of other priorities, but those seem to be the biggest heading our way right now. I think we need to come up with some creative funding, and I think we need to explore those creative fundings for these organizations. What they ask, and I think the thing that bothers me most is when we're asked for money. I think they ought to do their own house cleaning, like the county. For instance, the county, we heard a presentation from Daniel DeVito that he's maybe not replacing some, or retiring, combining some jobs. That's saving hundreds of thousands. Dave Hayes came in last meeting or two ago. He saved hundreds of thousands of dollars by fine-tuning the insurance policies for the county for the equipment. I think I would like to see more accountability from the organizations asking us for money in a for lack of better terms, audits. They should, don't ask me for $50,000 if I don't know where you're spending it. So I don't know. I'm just putting that out to my commissioners to have a little bit of fiscal responsibility for everybody who needs the money, and just don't come out and ask for money and not be able to tell me exactly where it's going. Does that make any sense, Sarah, over there?
It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So anyway, there's a lot of great things happening in Washington County, despite what you hear sometimes. We're moving forward, and I think it's going to be all good. Guys, just hang in there. The county's doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Meimelschmidt.
Good for now.
All right, thank you. I have a couple comments. I attended the Company 12 Volunteer Fire Company, what we used to call Fair Play Fire Department. They had a slight awards appreciation banquet. They swore in their new officers, And just a little over 4 years ago, it was a different story. So it was very rewarding to be down there and see that group up and active. Last week, County Administrator, I will still, some of your report just add some, hope you can add to it. County Administrator Slocum and Attorney Kirk Downey and I went down to the first meeting of our delegation and reminded them of all of our important requests and I think through court's active participation in MACO, we're going to maintain a presence down there in Annapolis, either in person through MACO or by phone calls with our delegation. And as we were leaving the meeting, we had the opportunity to network with the new Secretary of Commerce, Kelly Schultz, who, to her credit, gave us about 10 minutes of her time of some good conversation in the hallway of Annapolis. So I thought the trip was very important. I want to thank those who went with me, and we'll be down again soon. And then today, I believe we have a governor taking an oath of office, and I would like to wish him a very successful next 4 years. So with that being said, I'd like to begin with reports from county staff. Oh, and one more thing. Go ahead, would you?
No, go ahead.
I think the paper said today our own Barbara Ingram will be part of the inauguration. Good job, Washington County, Barbara Ingram. Ms. Payton, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. Deb Payton, Health and Human Services Director. I'm just here to I have the privilege of introducing to you the new employees with Washington County government, one of which you've already met, Mr. Holloway. Mr. Holloway, he's with Plan Review and Permitting. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to stand up so they know who you are. Grant Management. This is Allison Hartshorn with the Sheriff Patrol Division. We have Javier Montanero. I told him I wouldn't make him too bad of a mess of it. And then we have Joseph Willison. Thank you. Then in Emergency Services, Joni Bentz and Brittany Canterbury. So those are our new employees, and thank you very much.
Welcome.
Javier and Joseph are with which departments?
With Patrol.
Oh, okay.
Sheriff Patrol.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry, sir.
Welcome. We wish you much success. Commissioners, any comments for them?
Good luck to each of you.
Welcome aboard.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll parade them out.
Any other staff reports?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Leslie Hart, Washington County Department of Business Development. Happy 2019. First of all, I just wanted to give you a very brief update that business development, agriculture, will be focusing on agricultural industry sectors for the entire 2019 year. At this point, for the month of January, we would like to recognize and thank our pork producing farms for providing bacon, sausage, chops, ribs, roasts, and barbecue to the citizens of Washington County. In celebration of all things pork, January 2019 will be recognized as Pork Month. On January 29th, you, the County Commissioners, will be presenting a proclamation to one of our many pork producers in Washington County. We are the largest pork producer in the state of Maryland, and I will tell you that there will be a bacon tasting for you at that time.
Hey, arrive early is what you're saying.
We'll do it right here in the office. Second, the second annual Groundhog Day is scheduled for Friday, February 1st, and will be held at Big Cork Winery. This is our second Groundhog Day. It was a great event, a great success last year, and I anticipate it to be even better this year. Everyone who attends will receive 3 Big Cork Winery tastings along with over 15 local agricultural farms and farmers and producers. So you don't think about agriculture much in the winter when there's snow on the ground, but we still have wonderful agricultural products for you. We have foods, and all these folks and farmers will be showcasing their products at Groundhog Day. Farmers in our community have great tasting products year-round, not just in the warm months. And I have postcards for each of you to take and share with your family and friends. The cost is $15 per person and $20 per person after January 22nd. So I encourage you to register early, and you can visit Eventbrite for more details. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other staff reports? Sarah, Rob, any reports? Rob?
Just a couple words. Thank you, President and Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to congratulate, as you said, President Klein, congratulate Delegate Weibel for the selection to the chairman of the delegation in Annapolis. I did want to say something of a dear friend I lost yesterday from church, Mr. Chabot, very involved volunteer who will be dearly missed, and I felt obliged to mention that here today. And finally, I'd like to thank all of the folks in Public Works and in the Highway Department who made such an outstanding cleanup of the snow that we received this weekend, virtually unnoticed by many, and I think it was, Andrew, it was limited to simply some mechanical damage was all through wear and tear on equipment, completely safe, which is the most remarkable thing, and a fantastic operation. Thank you to Ed and all of his staff out there who did a fantastic job.
Thank you. I was advised not to bring this up, but I'm going to. I hear it's your birthday.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Next
Boy,
subject.
Happy birthday.
We'll sing during citizen participation.
Thank you very much.
I tried.
He tried. I didn't listen to the attorney.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully we got more cupcakes today.
Who knows? Okay, thank you, Rob. I'd like to begin. We're a little early for citizens' participation. Is there anything we could skip down to early? Any suggestions?
I know that absent.
Good Cascade.
Cascade?
Yeah,
Sure.
if you're ready, Joe.
Please do.
Let me make sure the presentation is ready.
Okay.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Joe Lee, the Director of Operations with JG Business Link International.
This is Dr. Jung from JG Business Link International.
Yes. And first, I'd like to ask if all of you had received this packet this morning. Perfect. Thank you. So we would like to provide the Board of County Commissioners a update on the Cascade Town Center and also what our plans are for the year 2019. I'll have Dr. Jung go ahead and start the presentation.
Right. The first item is trip report. We attended Global Infrastructure Cooperation Conference 2018 from September 18 to 20th of 2018 to promote the Cascade Town Center Development Project. More than 100 project owners from over 50 countries present their infrastructure development project to engage in a business partnership with the Korean government and contractors. For this year, State Delegate Bill Weibel and the former County Administrator Greg Murray presented the Cascade Town Center at the GICC 2018, representing the state of the Maryland. Also, the Cascade Town Center Development Committee, formed in the beginning of 2018, joined the promotional Korea trip to support the success of the Cascade Town Center development. At GICC 2018, Cascade Town Center Development Project did attract more interest than any other project from over 50 countries and received nothing but great feedback from government officials and major construction company that attended the conference. JGBRI has requested $200 million from the central government of Korea for the infrastructure development. of the Cascade Town Center and is planning a business trip to Korea to discuss details with government officials and contractors.
So here's some overviews of the development partnerships that we have. In the beginning of 2018, JGBLI formed the development partnerships to discuss the Cascade Town Center development plan, to gather expertise from for the development project, and to receive support from the local community. The Cascade Town Center Development Committee. The chair is Gunsan Lee, the chairman of JG Group, along with the vice chairs. We have myself, Greg Murray, the CEO of Washington Realty Management, Kirby DeLauder, president of WF DeLauder & Son, Gordon Poffenberger, the director of Fox & Associates, Greg Thompson, director of Breckville Hellman, and also Timothy Campbell, president of Callis Contractors. And also in the development committee, I do want to state that Susan Small, the director for the business development, is also part of this group as well. As part of our legal councils, we have several members there, along with property management and investor relations. We also have an overview of the advisor group on the next page that consists of several members. Particularly, we have 8 members in the architectural sector, 13 members from the construction sector, and 9 members from the engineering department. And attached is a couple of pictures that we had. One is a committee meeting that we had in February of 2018, and another is from the first trip in March 2018 with the development committee. The next page, we also have a picture from May 2018, welcoming an investor, along with the second picture to Korea from September 2018. So along with that, just wanted to go ahead. Right now, we are working on the 63-acre, and it is started. In partnership with Fox & Associates, JGBLI has prepared the concept plan for the 63-acre lakefront property, applied for demolition permits to Washington County to start on some of the different developments that we are working on there. With the approval of the demolition and partnership with WF DeLauder & Son, JGBLI is expecting site works at the 63-acre property beginning this year, possibly early spring. And JGBLI is also actively in discussion with home builders to establish affordable homes, townhomes, at the 63-acre property as soon as the site work is completed.
Just to add, Fox & Associates, they intended on being here a little bit later. But Mike and also Gordon were going to be here just to show their support. So.
Gotcha.
So next section is continuing development endeavors. Town Business Council for the Business Incubator Development at the Cascade Town Center. In December of 2018, Town Business Council, JBC, visited the Cascade Town Center and Washington County to resume its development efforts, to confirm a cooperative relationship with the county, and to renew the Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, that signed with Washington County and JGBLI in November 2017 during Global Enterprise Conference 2017 at Cascade Town Center. During the visit of JBC also presented a letter of congratulation from the President of the John County Council to the newly elected members of Washington County Board of County Commissioners on December 4th, 2018. In January of 2019, to resume the development project, JBC requested terms and conditions of farm sites for seeding Asian raisin tree to be planted in early spring, the cost estimation for establishing a commercial greenhouse, and the terms for renewal of the Memorandum of Agreement. And next section is Military Mutual Aid Association for Resort Development. In January of 2019, Military Mutual Aid Association M+ and JGBLI will resume discussion of a comprehensive resort development at the Cascade Town Center. JGBLI is planning a business trip to Korea to discuss a detailed investment plan and to coordinate M+'s upcoming visit to the Cascade Town Center for conducting its due diligence. Next one is Utilex Company. Utrecht company's Pharmaceutical Research and Development Center is in Pharmaceutical Research and Development Center development at Cascade Town Center. In September of 2018, JHBLI signed a memorandum of understanding with Utilex, a biopharmaceutical research company developing innovative immuno-oncology medicines, to establish a pharmaceutical research and development center at Cascade Town Center. Dr. Guan, President and CEO of Utilex, visited Cascade Town Center for due diligence in September 2nd, 2018. And Dr. Jung-Hoon Han, Vice President of Utilex, is currently visiting Cascade Town Center to continue Utilex's feasibility study on existing building structure, the former PX building and surrounding area.
And originally we planned on having Dr. Han here. I just found out that he's on his way, but ran into a bit of traffic. But when he does, I'll be sure that he does say hello to the commissioners.
Next one is Hanban National University and Wongang University for satellite campus development. In January 2019, Hanban National University and Wongang University requested an update on Cascade Town Center development, and JHBLI received their progress report regarding establishment of satellite campuses at the Cascade Town Center. JHBLI is planning a business trip in spring of 2019 to Korea to discuss a detailed plan with them. And next one is Summit Health. Healthcare program Summit Health is on healthcare program development with Jeonbuk National University Hospital and its Clinical Trial Center for Functional Food, CTCF2. In March of 2018, Summit Health and JHBLI signed a memorandum of agreement to jointly develop a healthcare program at the Cascade Town Center. JHBLI is planning to meet in this month with Summit Health to follow up the healthcare program development in partnership with CTCF2.
And recently, JHBLI has signed memorandums of understanding with two consultants. One is Kukje Consulting in Korea. We signed an MOU with them in connection with a large retail chain in Korea to introduce the chain to the Cascade Town Center. And Kukje Consulting also has helped the retail chain open up branches in several countries such as China, Mongolia, Vietnam, and also in Los Angeles. The second MOU that was signed with JHBLI is Vision Eltech Co., another consultant in Korea. They have a specialty in attracting foreign investment to the brand hotel that we have planned along with a healthcare institution development at the Cascade Town Center. And we also have several buyers in discussion, different parts of the project development. There are three that we have listed here. Number one is Taemyeong Luchen IF Group is number two, and number three is McKinley Holdings. We have all three parties. We are currently in discussions. It's still early to say more than what we've already found out, and we are in the process of vetting them and continuing those discussions. If they do move along, we'll be introducing them to the county as well. So are there any questions regarding the current update?
I have one. You've stated JHBLI has requested $200 million from central government of Korea. What's the process there? You've requested it, so what happens next? How long before you get an answer?
So currently, the process for the $200 million that we requested from the Korean central government, since we've already made the presentation, they are going through the process of vetting the property itself. We do have to meet with them and the government officials to continue the conversation to make sure that they can have a Korean construction company or several Korean construction companies come out to the site, actually visit the Cascade Town Center, go through their due diligence and feasibility studies. Once we have gone through that process, they'll go back and continue with their proposal to the Korean central government. And both parties, JHBLI and the Korean construction company, will essentially become awarded, if we're awarded, with those funds to develop what we had planned. So it could be anywhere from what we requested. It could be more, it could be less, but right now we are in the process of trying to get that done.
And I am pleased that on committees you have a lot of local people. You're using local people. You got Ellsworth Electric. You have Fox and Associates, Breck, Bill and Hellman, it just, list goes on, some,
Dallas contractors.
yeah, that you have those people on your committees and
Yes.
given some local work here, so.
And to further the question you asked, when you look at the GICC and the $200 million, the reason the Korean contractors are involved is they become, in essence, a project manager. Obviously, they aren't shipping backhoes over here to do work at Cascade Town Center.
Right.
But as the project manager, it becomes good for the economy in the Korean environment, and also they then can funnel that money, which is where MOUs and various agreements come in, to the local contractors, such as a Callis contractor and architects and engineers, et cetera, so that they can do the work on this side of the pond at Cascade Town Center. So it becomes a funding source that allows for infrastructure development, replacement of all the older infrastructure, improvement, pad-ready sites, et cetera, that the Korean government would actually sponsor. Good for them, good for us, and it makes the development process much easier, knowing that whoever moves in doesn't then have to spend $100, $200 million to put infrastructure on site.
Thank you.
Just my question,
Yes.
explain the difference of an MOU and how it goes to a contract.
Memorandum.
Approximately how many of them do we have?
We have several memorandum of understandings along with letters of intents and memorandum of agreements. There are several steps. Typically, it goes from a letter of intent to a memorandum of understanding to a memorandum of agreement to a contract. We can skip a couple of those steps if the negotiations go well, but essentially they're listing what both parties are required or will be required to do as part of the development. So for a memorandum of understanding, we can have some terms that JGBLI will be consulting with the company that wants to invest into the property. It'll state out the terms of what JGBLI is supposed to do, but it'll also require that the company that wants to invest, what their benchmarks or requirements will be needed so they can continue the project as well. So it's not as if we start a contract and then we sign it, but they sit on the development for 3 or 4 years before they actually engage. We want them actually starting as soon as we sign.
An MOU is a way of just trying to get the project channeled towards a contract so we can break ground and
Yes.
do this.
And we'll use Jungin Business Council, which was Jungin Glover, as an example. The county signed an agreement with Jungin County as a partner county. The state of Maryland, with Jeollanam-do Province, in which that county resides, has signed an MOU for several years now with the province itself. So because the state of Maryland has an agreement with that province and the county has an MOU with Junghoon County, that allows the federal monies and the different support that the government of Junghoon County provides to the Business Council to funnel down through and be invested in the United States. Without those MOUs, that's not a possibility. So it's more significant than just signing a piece of paper. It actually allows the flow of money to begin. Then once the MOU is signed and some agreements are discussed, some terms, then you go to the memorandum of agreement, such as the county signed with Junghoon Business Council. With that memorandum of agreement, there are specific terms. There were 4 parties to that: their government, the Business Council, Washington County, JGBLI. That then has actionable items that say, we will do this to get to the contract. Now they're ready to come back, as we've discussed, and actually sign contracts to get, in this case, 800 acres of agricultural property, which in Washington County, an agricultural property that is clean and free so they can do holistic foods is very important. That's available here. That's good for the people that own the property. And then again, that starts manufacturing process, distribution, which of course in this case was 50 employees. That's about $50,000 a year in a 5-year period, $250,000 to the county just in income tax. So there's a lot of things that now can begin because those MOUs, MOAs, and now in the contract phase can start so that ground can be broken, buildings rehabbed, and employees hired.
One of the other, good.
So going back to the 200 million question, just to follow up, is there a time frame for this that we're going to know? Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Or is it we have no clue? And at the same time, is there a time frame where they could come back and say, no, we don't want to invest into that property?
Well, if they decline the proposal, we'll find out pretty quickly. But since it's going through the process right now, since it's January, they've already been reviewing it for about 3 months. I would expect anywhere for 3 to 6 months of more reviews. Once we find out that a Korean company is elected to come to the U.S. and vet the project, then we know that the project is, or the proposal that we submitted is moving farther along.
The contractor that comes to the U.S. to vet the site actually then signs on with the Korean government, and much of that money comes through the state of Maryland, who is also engaged and said they would be a conduit for the money. That's one of the accountability measures, and one of the positives of Delegate Weibel actually attending that conference and having a letter from the Secretary of Commerce. So that will then come through the state of Maryland. Typically, a lot of those vettings are done in the spring, so contractors are actually setting up a time frame when they can actually travel to the U.S. and vet the site. So we would hope to see that in the spring. Then they go back with the Korean government, the infrastructure ministry, and they start preparing for what the ministry feels is an appropriate award, and that money starts funneling through them as the project manager, and we start setting up contracts on this end.
Thank you.
Another question I have. Folks up in Cascade or around the county are asking what types of businesses are allowed there. We do have zoning in place, correct? That might be a question for you to elaborate on.
That's right. So all the zoning, and Tim Lung, our former zoning administrator, and our current zoning administrator, Ashley Holloway, are both here to explain that. But zoning is in place like any other place in the county. The particular zoning there, if Ashley knows, feel free to speak, but I don't know if you have this memorized yet. Ashley, maybe Tim does?
The zoning of the property is SED, Special Economic Development District, and that is a very flexible zoning category that was implemented some years ago, specifically for the redevelopment of former Fort Ritchie, and it allows a variety of uses, both residential, light industrial.
Retail.
Did you want me to start over again?
No, you're
okay. The SED zoning district permits a variety of uses, residential, commercial, and light industrial.
While we have Tim, there was also a question about fast-tracking this project, and could you speak to that, Tim?
Very good.
Of course, our business development office is the lead department in applications for fast-track projects, but that process has evolved over the years as the Department of Plan Review and Permitting has streamlined the review process, and essentially pretty much all new development projects that come in through plan review and permitting are fast-track, in meaning that projects can have a building permit, file for a building permit concurrently with their site plan review. That used to be only afforded to folks that were given fast-track status. Now we give that status to all projects. So the other aspects of fast-track are that the project is placed essentially on the top of the stack for in the review process, and also an expedited scheduling on our Development Advisory Committee agenda.
Thank you, Tim.
It's a good marketing tool to be able to say it's a fast-track project.
Our turnaround time, Rich Eichelberger is here as well, and our turnaround time on permits and plan reviews, I think, is less than 2 weeks as of now. Is that right, Rich?
For the residential side, that is correct. Commercial, depending on how intense it may be a little bit longer, but this time of year, typically we're a little bit slower right after the holiday. So right now it's running about 2 to 3 weeks. Could be a little longer in the spring, but historically, over the last several years, unless a project is very complex and there's a lot of back and forth between our staff and the design professionals, very rarely is it running much past 4 to 5 weeks at the longest.
There's also several pieces that have to be put into place that help facilitate this type project. Obviously, the county's been very supportive, and certainly appreciate everything that we can do together to make this project happen. But things like healthcare, when you engage healthcare agencies that are interested in putting not only in conjunction with additional training for interns, that type thing, but putting healthcare facilities on site. And then you look at things like housing. When you're aging in place and you have senior communities, one of the things they want on site is healthcare. They don't want to have to drive for 30 minutes if something happens to actually receive the care that they may need. That makes it much more lucrative. And we've talked to local developers that have said, wow, one of the issues up there has always been the distance from healthcare. Even though it's not far, if you're aging in place and something happens, you don't want it to be far. And with this type of MOU and engagement from healthcare facilities, healthcare operators, that helps some of the locals have a lot more flexibility in what they may be able to build or provide on site, which is a very positive thing. That's just one of the type puzzle pieces that need to be in place so that you can help move the development forward.
And speaking of healthcare, I just wanted to mention that Dr. Hahn just came in, the Vice President of Utilex.
Dr. Hahn?
Yes. Hi, Doctor.
And Dr. Hahn actually spent several years teaching in New Jersey, went back to Korea, and is able to speak ad nauseum about cancer research and things they want to do, things that I'll never understand in my life. But
Dr. Hahn, we welcome you. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And then let me just give me a couple of minutes to introduce what's the Utilex company, and then my little bit of background first. So CEO of Utilex is Dr. Kwon, and he did immuno-oncology research for 40 years, and he made a tremendous achievement in the immuno-oncology area. And then, for example, this year Nobel Prize winner is to find out how T cell is activated for to kill the cancer cell. And then the level of his research is the same as the Nobel Prize winner, though. So actually, we set up our company in 2015 February, and then we made a IPO in South Korea December 21st. That's the first day to the stock exchange in Utilex. And then around right now, the stock price in US Utilex in South Korea is around $80. And our value is like almost 1 billion value in company. And then since you have a very innovative technology, we want to extend the opportunity to the USA and then make some big, our company building in this area, because we have FDA facility, all the things in the good area. So we are focused on the expanding our technology to the USA country by building this company in this area. Yeah. And then just give me my background. So I did oncology research USA 7 years, and then I work in the UMDNJ, University of Medicine Dentistry in New Jersey, for the oncology research 5 years. And after that, I went to the Harvard Medical School for the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute for 2 years. After that, I changed my mind doing the business, because I see the business is very important in South Korea in biotechnology. And I work in the multinational pharmaceutical company like Eli Lilly, AstraZeneca, BMS, Mondi Pharma, Teva, and Amgen, which is a very top-level biopharmaceutical company, 18 years, only oncology area. So I had the oncology area experience around 26 years. And then I joined the Utilex to make this company technology become commercialized, materialized. So I'm working on all the IPO process, and then how clinical trial going on USA, make the approval USA our technology in here, and eventually we can provide our medicine to the patient and then make the lives better.
Thank you. So yes, with Dr. Gwon and Dr. Han, we are working with them to bring Utilex to the Cascade Town Center.
I believe when they went public, your stock was at 50. Dr. Hahn, your stock was at 50 when you went public, and now 80?
Yes, you're right. So actually, our value $50 per our stock, and then in terms of company value is 0.45 billion in Korea, and they hit the $100 actually. And right now, as you know, our stock market is not a good stock market in the USA. But within this situation, and considering December situation, we had a very good, increase for the stock price. Already make the double there. So if you put the one technology in the clinical trial and then some license out, we're selling our technology to the big pharmaceutical company that's licensed out. Easily you can make the 1 billion or 1.5 million easily, the value like that. And then eventually you can make that everything, some clinical trial successful in the launching our product in the US market, you can easily make the 1 billion company market. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for the doctor? Okay, and I see you have two other guests from Fox.
Oh, yes. Yes, working with our partners, Fox & Associates, I just want to say hello to Michael and Gordon. We appreciate all the support that you've been providing us.
Like Schiffler, Gordon, Boffenberger, I'm sure you all know of their work in Washington County. So now we've stalled long enough that everyone got here, so we can stop talking.
Thank you. Any other questions for our guest? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, citizens' participation. Are there any citizens who'd like to comment? Seeing none, our next item is at 11:15. Let's take a brief recess and wait on Michael Ryka unless he's here. Is that okay, gentlemen? Thank you. Brief recess. That's jumping awful. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Laypole, Senior Grant Manager with the Office of Grant Management, and here with me today is Sheriff Mullendorf from Washington County Sheriff's Office. We are seeking approval for the acceptance of the award from the Maryland Emergency Management Agency in the amount of $30,000. The state of Maryland, through the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, has an initiative for a statewide Maryland incident management team that provides a valuable capability to the communities in Maryland and surrounding areas to supplement resources with trained personnel who can assist with the management of a major incident. MEMA wants to employ Charlie Summers for 16 hours per week to help with the organization, training, and implementation of the incident management team throughout the state with a primary emphasis on Western Maryland. When he is not doing business to assist the incident management team, he will be utilized by the Washington County Sheriff's Office to assist with emergency management, CALEA accreditation, management of the county radio system fleet map, and a variety of other duties for the Sheriff's Office. His salary and all incidental costs would be paid for by MEMA, and all the time he spends working for the Sheriff's Office would not cost the county anything. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant funding guidelines. Matching funds or in-kind support is not required, and there are no unusual conditions or requirements associated with the grant. MEMA will pay for this position through the grant until the position is no longer needed. The position would be discontinued at that time. Are there any questions?
Who determines when the position is no longer needed? Is that a county decision or MEMA?
No, it would be MEMA.
MEMA?
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I think it's great that we have Charlie's expertise yet again, so.
Well, I think during the South County flooding, we saw the advantages of having the Maryland IMT here to assist us. And Charlie's concentration will be the Western Maryland portion of the IMT, which most of the members are members of Washington County government, public service. And so I think it's advantageous to the county to allow the grant to go through.
Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to accept as presented.
Motion to accept.
Second it.
First and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I would also like to acknowledge John Schultz, who came from, he is the team leader of the Maryland Incident Management Team, and if you have any questions of him, he's available also. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Stephanie, I see you're next, so we'll keep you there.
Okay.
Okay, is that okay, gentlemen? Move forward with that.
I don't see Eric. Staff's not here. Eric.
You have everybody here for this presentation.
No, I can
Would you
proceed
rather
if you,
wait?
it doesn't matter to me. If you like, I can go ahead and present.
Are you okay moving forward with like their presence?
Sure.
All right. Proceed.
Okay. Again, I'm Stephanie Laypole, Senior Grant Manager with the Office of Grant Management. I'm here today seeking approval for the expansion of the Rural Legacy area and submission of the fiscal year 2020 Rural Legacy Program application in the amount of $3,416,500 and to accept funding as awarded. Each year, the Department of Planning and Zoning submits a funding request to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources for the purchase of easements in the county's Rural Legacy area. Rural Legacy properties are lands of significant agricultural, historic, environmental, public, and cultural value inside of the designated Rural Legacy area boundary, which is concentrated around the Antietam battlefield. This year's grant application will include an expansion of the Rural Legacy area to incorporate further significant historic and agricultural lands in the county for considered easements. Past Rural Legacy Program grants have significantly contributed to the progress Planning and Zoning has made toward the goal of 50,000 permanently preserved acres of prime and productive farm and open space land. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant application and funding guidelines. There are no unusual conditions or requirements associated with the acceptance of the award. There are recurring department operating expenses for the inspections of easement properties to be completed by staff. Time required for inspections are 8 hours per year or $300 per year, and the cost is covered by the Department of Planning and Zoning. The grant does provide 3% administration for staff time and 1.5% compliance allowance. All title, survey, and settlement costs are paid for 100% by the grant.
Stephanie, your staff have joined you. Gentlemen, please forgive us for being early. Thank you for
really
being here.
early. Okay. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
We heard Stephanie's report, so a couple of items here. We're talking about, in addition to the grant request, to expand the current Rural Legacy area. Currently, the area is about a couple thousand acres, and for two reasons we would like to expand that area. First of all, in that area, we have a lot of property owners that we're currently working with. However, looking, say, 10 to 20 years ahead, we're going to need to tap into more property owners. That brings us to the second reason for wanting to expand the area. And I'm still trying to catch my breath running down the stairs. The second reason is that the state has been increasing the amount of money that we have been receiving. So we want to make sure we have sufficient property owners who are interested in selling easements to be able to tap into those additional funds. To date, in the 22 years, we have acquired about 6,900 acres. We've been awarded over $22 million. And that is on about 65 farms. So it's a very popular program. It brings dollars into the community. We've been told that those dollars get turned over several times. Landowners usually pay down some debt. They do capital improvements. It pours money back into the economy. They buy equipment. So we want to get as many dollars here for the rural communities as we can. So we think it's prudent to go ahead and try to expand the area. Now, what we will do, while the state is concurrently reviewing our project, we will have two meetings in the rural area with affected landowners for the expanded area and give them sufficient time to make comment, and then bring this back to a public hearing with the commissioners. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris to talk just a minute about the expanded area.
Morning. I guess we'll just get to the brass tacks of it. We're looking to increase the rural legacy area by a little over 12,000 acres, which is about a 28% increase. Of that 12,000 acres, 9,800 or acres, or 80%, are in areas that are already designated for preservation. They're priority preservation areas. So the vast majority of that land area is already dialed in for preservation, future preservation, not currently preserved, of course. While the increase is just over a quarter of the size of the original rural legacy area, the expansion area nearly doubles the amount of undeveloped land. That means it decreases the overall percentage of preserved land, which means there's more land available for preservation efforts. It only increases the amount of developed land in the rural legacy area by 4,500 acres, which only represents about 8% of the whole. So this is land that's developed. It's commercial, residential, things that we wouldn't touch with preservation anyway. Also, this expansion gives an additional option additional options for preserving land that's significant to the battlefield. Nearly 7 miles of area along the C&O Canal and about 2.5 miles along the Appalachian Trail. It includes 78 historic sites, and the area is predominantly ag, rural, and environmental conservation zoning. So it's ideal for these sorts of preservation programs. Of course, it also helps us preserve area around natural resources such as the Potomac River, the Antietam Creek, Israel Creek, Marsh Run, Downey Branch, and dozens of unnamed streams. It includes areas in 4 watersheds and would help protect areas along South Mountain, Elk Ridge, and large swaths of forest land. There's high landowner interest in these areas. They just haven't been able to find a way to preserve their land due to possible issues with other programs that this program could afford them to get permanent easements. With the full funding of this grant, we could preserve upwards of 1,000 acres. So that would be very nice for our land preservation goals. Questions?
How much money is in rural legacy? Or how much did we get this year?
We got $2.3 million.
$2.3
which is the
million?
second largest award in the state, Frederick being the first.
Right.
So the funds, what happened, the state, to balance the budget, and this goes all the way back to 1991 with Governor Schaefer, there were budget problems back then, and the land preservation funds were diverted to other uses in part. Then rural legacy came along and was never fully funded the way it was supposed to be. So ever since, we are told that more than $1 billion of land preservation funds have been diverted to other uses. When Governor Hogan came in, one of his objectives was to restore the funding that had been diverted. It's a 10-year process because those who were receiving our dollars said we need time to get other funds to restore our coffers. So we're about the 3rd year into the restoration. So in time, all of our land preservation funds should be increasing.
And they have been.
And the rural legacy is a permanent easement.
Correct.
Correct.
Forever.
It doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't be minor league developed with a farmer's home or a family member.
Yeah, we have, within the deed of easement, rural legacy is different than one of our other key programs in that rural legacy, we can tailor to each individual property what they want to do. If they want to reserve a building right, we dock them on the amount they're paid. And we write that into the deed of easement. We have a certain criteria, basically 1 house per 50 acres within reason that will allow with the penalties for reserving that. Our other program, it's hard and fast. There's rules, no negotiation. So yes, they could do that, but if they choose not to, it's forever that there would not be a house. Now, we always try to have at least one house on any farm, because if a farmer goes to buy the place, he can't live there and farm it, it's going to be difficult. So we always try to encourage them to have at least one house.
What about solar farms?
Solar farms are not allowed. What they can do on top of any of the structures, they can place solar. But the, quote, solar farms are not permitted on rural legacy. Now, our other program, there was a window of opportunity that is expiring here very soon that they could have done up to a certain percentage and or 5 acres. But it is an option. They're not allowed because the easements say agricultural use only, and solar is not an agricultural use. We've heard some people say, well, we're harvesting the sun just like the corn crop uses it, but that hasn't flown. So in general, the solar farms are not allowed in any of our programs.
And it's important to keep in mind that the large majority of land area under the rural legacy area is in the priority preservation area anyway, which we don't allow solar farms in the priority preservation area. So it's de facto already cannot have solar farms.
I was just making sure. I agree with you, so thank you.
Other
More
questions?
All right. Hear a motion to,
I'll make the motion to approve.
I have a first, is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We probably should wait for that one. I would like to suggest a short recess and wait on Michael Raka and okay, thank you. Short recess.
open. Do we have to do anything?
Yeah, just, well, you just went to a short recess, right?
That's it. We just went into recess.
Okay.
Mr. Plessinger, welcome. Would you go ahead and proceed with your presentation?
Absolutely. So we have two items here. I'll lead off with the budget transfer for our fire truck repairs and building improvements. Essentially, what we're doing is we got a fire truck from BWI that needed some repairs. And this was to replace the one that we lost the previous year in the fire. So we're fixing up the secondary fire truck to be our second crash truck. And we're using the funds. What we're going to do is we're going to take the air traffic control tower replacement CIP project off the books and use those funds for the fire truck and the building maintenance. And the reason we did that is basically because of priority of projects. The fire truck is one of our high priorities of safety of the airport. And what we're doing is with the air traffic control tower, we are looking how much on the financial obligation does the airport have. Currently with the tower being owned and operated by the FAA. If we were to do a new tower, the FAA essentially would help fund the tower itself, but all the operating costs would come back on the airport. So we're trying to prolong that FAA tower responsibility as long as we can. So that's why we decided to use those funds for the fire truck and the building improvements.
Commissioners, any questions?
So I guess for me, I don't understand. So we have two towers out there?
No, sir, just the one tower. Yeah, so the tower replacement project would take down the current air traffic control tower and then put up a new one in its place.
And FAA would fund a lot of that, but it would, the cost of operation would be on our back and would be a lot more expensive than it is now?
That's correct. Yeah.
So on concurrences, so when you put this agenda report together, you have a airport advisory committee. Do they get to vet all of this as well?
So we did not run this by the Airport Advisory Committee, specifically the transfer for the fire truck. But to their knowledge, we have been holding off the tower project as long as we can due to the operational cost.
And then the fire truck is now who owns the fire truck now?
So we own the fire truck. It was donated from BWI.
Commissioners, any other questions?
The tower was kind of a topic of discussion several months ago, maybe a year ago, if not more. It seems to my recollection that was something our Airport Advisory Board was advocating for. So are we thinking that this project is taken off the table completely for the time being?
We're definitely going to keep it in the CIP for future years because it will need replaced eventually. Just as of now, we want to push it off a few years.
Does this need to go back to the Airport Advisory Committee concurrences?
Yeah, who's we? You go ahead and answer your question first.
For me?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, yeah.
I'm good at that.
That's what I'm asking commissioners. Should this go back to the Airport Advisory Committee to take this off and take off the tower project and move it to this? I mean, that's a question for the commissioners.
Yeah. I don't know.
What's, maybe get Kirk's opinion on that. Is that what normally happens, or Rob?
Well, I think it would be advisable to consider the Airport Advisory Committee's position on this. However, what I'm going to ask Garrison is if you don't have the fire truck that needs to be repaired, do we have an immediate need that a service can't be provided? And that's how I understood this, is that a service has to be provided with the fire truck, which is certainly a life safety issue.
Right.
Maybe it's not as important as the way I read it.
Yeah, so we currently have one crash truck. The thing is with the second crash truck, when we have these new A320s, and one crash truck isn't quite going to do it in the event that something happens. So this is why we've put the fire truck as the priority in front of the tower project.
And with that, is there come some FAA approvals or the capability of the two crash trucks, which necessitates this second truck? That's a consideration.
So we're meeting all FAA obligations with the one crash truck, but like I said, those obligations are very minimal. And to the event if something were to happen, that second crash truck would be a big help in that.
And that's why you had two previously.
That's correct.
So what I'm hearing, there's an immediate need for security or safety with the second truck being available.
Yeah, I have another question there. It said one of the airport's fire trucks was totaled in February of 2018. I don't recall ever hearing anything about that.
Yeah, so there was a fire in the fire station with the one crash truck that totaled the fire truck. So
the fire was in the fire station?
That's correct.
And like I said, I don't ever recall hearing anything about that. So how did the fire get started in the fire station?
That was before my time as well. I don't know the specific details on how the fire started.
Yeah, Rob, I'd like to get an update on that.
Yeah, so we did receive insurance money for that truck. It went into the, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, it went into the 2018 for our reserves.
It closed out, excuse me, it closed out into fiscal year 2018. So now here in fiscal year 19, the funds are not readily available to use towards the repairs.
Okay. How much did we receive?
Do you have the number?
I don't have their number that we received from the insurance company. No, I think it was like 175, if I believe it was.
I think you're right.
I think it was
I will
right
get
there.
that for you. We think it was around 170,000.
Yeah.
We do obviously have another meeting on the 29th. That is not next week, but the following week. And Garrison, you do have one crash truck, so perhaps the thing to do is revisit this with the advisory committee, even if informally. You
Okay.
can share this with them if that's. I don't know if you have another meeting or not.
Randy.
For that.
I have a problem with that. I'm not going to be, we just advised him to wait for another meeting, and Allegiant comes in and turns upside down tomorrow, and we have one crash truck, and we're on record saying, let's delay that. I'm not for that.
That's perfectly fine with me. Simply looking for what you're comfortable with.
Made my point.
Very good. So any more questions?
So is that
Any motions? Motion?
A motion to accept the transfer of the budget.
Second?
Second.
Second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
5-0. And I guess, Mr. Plessinger, or while you're here, you have one more?
Yes,
to
sir.
Finish with us?
Yep. So while I'm here, we're also looking to address a little pay discrepancy we have between our maintenance staff on the airfield side and also the terminal side. Earlier this year, the terminal staff were upgraded to a grade 9, and the maintenance staff was almost left off of that. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to upgrade the airfield maintenance side from a grade 7 to match the terminal maintenance side as a grade 9. And this will help us fill that position. It's been empty all year. And the hard part that we have is filling these positions is the ARF requirements, which is our firefighting requirements to, in order to run the airport there. So the salary impact, this is just a part-time position, will be about $3,500 a year, and that is just based off part-time.
So the maintenance person, what all are they responsible? some of the things that they're responsible for.
Yeah, so on the maintenance side, it's the airfield maintenance, so they will, so they're also firefighters, so they'll stand by for the firefighters of flights.
That's what
They will
That's what I was
also,
getting at. So, so they do have some cross-training ability.
that's
or,
correct.
Training.
Mm-hmm.
They have other duties that are also.
That's where I was going with that.
Say that again.
That's where I was going with that. I wanted to see if they were able to assist in fires and so forth. The
Yep.
maintenance.
Yep, that's what we're looking for in the position. Yeah.
I'm glad to see this come up because I believe last year during our salary review discussion, this was mentioned to me by some folks and it wasn't accomplished at that time. So.
Hey, any more discussion, questions? Is there a motion on the floor to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
First and second, any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
early.
Appreciate it.
We'll go back to, I see Mr. Rika has arrived. Sir, your turn. Thank you for being patient with us, and we're running early or late, depending on your viewpoint. But welcome, sir.
I'm here for two reasons this morning. One, to provide an update on a task that was presented to the Economic Development Commission last fall, which was to look into the Health Advisory Board and see if we could resurrect that committee, put it back in place, and also offer some suggestions for moving forward. So the packet of information that I've passed out, the first document, 2-page, is the summary of that work group. And just a very brief summary, we pulled together a diverse group of individuals in the community who either work in or have insight into the overall health of our community. And that included not only health clinicians, but also county and city individuals who are familiar with zoning and processes and legal structures as well. We came together for a couple reasons. One, to look at the existing bylaws to see what revisions, if any, needed to be put in place to move that committee forward. And two, to look at the organization of the structure, the membership of that committee, and did the previous structure align with the needs of today. So we made in this document some suggestions, very minor revisions to the existing bylaws. That group has not met in probably 8 years. And then we also made some suggestions as to the participation, and that's listed in bullet point form. There are 16 members, or really representatives, that we suggested would be helpful to this group. And it really is divided 50-50 between clinicians or healthcare clinicians and also people who are affiliated with engineering, zoning, county, city, people who understand some of the workings of elements that contribute to community health and the health of a population. So we bring this to you today for your review, and if it is acceptable, the EDC will then move forward to pull this group together to make those minor revisions to the existing bylaws, to call a group meeting, to set a schedule in place, and to move forward with this group, starting to form so that it can be an advisory board to the commissioners. The diversity of the group is such that we wanted to be able to provide insight and advice, whether it would be a human health situation, an animal health situation, such as an outbreak, whether it be something related to disease with weather pattern changes, standing water, and also environmental issues that are connected to the city or the county. And we hope that we have been able to accomplish that through this distribution of 16 recommendations.
Commissioners, any questions?
So for some background to catch you up, because it's been a considerable amount of time, back in approximately 2006, the Health Advisory Committee was in place. It was no longer serving since then. And the commissioners at the time, the board previously, probably about 6 months ago, asked the Economic Development Committee at that time to review, and at that time the chair was Julie Rahm. Currently, obviously, the chair, so to speak, is Michael. So
we say it
that's
that
why
way
we're
because
back
we're
here
really a
before you.
group of volunteers. As you recall, the EDC as a formal commission ceased to exist, and we're in that transition phase.
So, but thanks to Michael, it has carried on with this advisory committee to bring.
Is this something you want us to review and get back with you later to move forward, or you want some type of consensus today?
I think I'll leave that to you. When we met last, you had said you looked forward to hearing back from this work group. So I don't want to put you on the spot with a response. I'll leave this for your review, and then we can communicate through Rob would be the most efficient manner.
And that would most likely include bringing Michael back with any comments that you had in 2 weeks or so.
Commissioners, you okay with that? Gentlemen?
Yeah, it gives us a chance to
Review it?
Yes, and if we have
Thank
some recommendations, we can run them by our administrator.
Mm-hmm.
I'll convey those.
So this will come back in 2 weeks, is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The second reason that I'm here is to provide an update on the transition of the Economic Development Commission. So I'll provide a brief update. You have some materials in front of you for your further review. But a brief summary, back in September, the EDC made a suggestion to the commissioners that we would like to move forward with a different structure. And the reason was that we had become really kind of stuck in our processes that weren't effective in moving us forward. I think the county recognized that, I think the city recognized that, and the members of the EDC recognized that. So we needed a new structure to allow us to move forward in a different direction. The commissioners granted that opportunity, and the formal charter was revoked to allow us to move forward with a different strategy, moving into what we refer to as a public-private partnership. The wheel design or graphic that you have in front of you is a visual display of the organizational structure that we've come up with. And this wheel design is to serve as the hub, kind of playing on some language with Hagerstown over the years, and also to show that this wheel really has no layers or hierarchy associated with it. The hope was to bring multiple stakeholders to the table in a coalition, a collaborative manner, or a forum. This second page, where it says initial EDC organizational structure, is a very high-level brief summary of this structure. So we've changed the name to Economic Development Coalition to convey a sense of camaraderie, of an open table of people coming together as stakeholders to work together in a collaborative manner as opposed to a formal commission. And the structure involves 12 central core members, and that's listed here in these bullet point forms. And these members represent organizations in our community, from county government, city government, chamber of commerce, chief, on down the line. And then the additional representation is 16 industry sectors. We have also come up with an initial mission and vision. I'll read that for you for those that don't have the documents in front of you. And the initial mission is the Economic Development Coalition is a collaborative hub of business opportunity and economic prosperity. And the initial working vision is the Economic Development Coalition will build a culture of business retention, expansion, and providing opportunity for a thriving and prosperous community. The next document you have is titled Edc Transformation Process, and this is a very brief timeline to give you a framework of what we've done. Phase 1 in September was to ask the commissioners to revoke that charter and allow us to restructure. Phase 2 in October and November was to bring together the executive committees and start to brainstorm about mission, vision, organizational structure. What do we want to do? What do we look like? How can we form these partnerships? November and December was phase 3. It was bringing together these different 16 industry sectors and deciding what are those sectors, how do we explain why we use those sectors and not others. And then on down the line through several other phases. We did pause slightly in November and December to do a little more reflection on the Health Advisory Board. and also some more reflection on the organizational structure. The outcome of that discussion in December was to revise our organizational structure to remove some complexity. The original organizational structure called for developing specific work groups in each of the 16 sectors, and we realized as a group that would be too cumbersome. There are already groups out there that are working together in those sectors, that are doing good work. We're going to develop relationships with those existing work groups and those existing organizations. And then on the back of that page down to phase 5, we talk about the future. And we talk about what are the future goals and objectives. We want to establish consistent funding stream eventually, create a 501 eventually, hire staff eventually, and facilitate annual EDC conferences, seminars, educational processes to inspire and recruit and attract people to the area. So to break that down very briefly, we had early consensus around a number of variables. There was alignment and agreement related to the concept of a public-private partnership. There was alignment and agreement related to the structure that brings us together. There was alignment and agreement related to this hub or wheel design. And then we moved into a several-month period of diverse discussion. But even through that, there was initial consensus around mission and vision, initial funding opportunities such as donations, membership fees, funding streams through grants, services, conferences, a formal organization, staff, and the culture. Should we be an organization that forms through a very aggressive, very short time frame, or should it be systematic and relationship building? And there's risk in both of those. So we spent several months in brainstorming some of those variables. And there's continued debate around the timelines associated with all of those. There's the need for funds in order to establish realistic objectives and the need for clerical support, potentially with initial assistance through the county with minutes and things of that nature. So overall, the restructuring is moving as planned. It's a timely process. Whenever you bring a group of diverse individuals together, there are diverse perspectives, ideas, but we really are on schedule when we step back and look at that overall restructuring process. By March, we would like to formalize the structure. We would like to have elections to bring in officers and continue to move us forward, and we'll start to identify funding streams as well. I would be more than happy to answer any questions for you, but my intent was to provide a high-level summary so I didn't get bogged down in a lot of details and history over the past 5 or 6 months.
Commissioners, any questions?
Is that all right?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Bro, just looking at the 12 in the executive summary, I know one thing that I'm pretty sure we're going to hear is that we've got the city of Hagerstown, we've got Washington County, but we have nobody representing the other communities, Williamsport, Hancock, Smithsburg, at all.
Yeah, that was a extended discussion early on in our meetings, and we ended up including them as a sector on this wheel. And the reason we did that is if we didn't consolidate, we would end up with a very large committee, and we would have dozens of towns represented on the executive committee. So we struggled with this a little bit, and we had some conversation with some town representatives and even a town mayor to say, how do you feel about that? The response initially was, it depends how this rolls out, and it depends on how this group forms and whether we welcome the participation and we truly listen to the ideas and the needs of those towns. So at this point in the forming process or transformation process, the towns were included as a segment on this wheel, but we carved out Hagerstown simply because of the size, the location, and a number of other things in relation to the history of economic development. One of the things I should point out is that this whole process, this concept, continues to evolve. Nothing is cut in stone. Our environment's evolving. The opportunities over the next couple of years are going to continue to emerge and be different. We have to be a very flexible organization. So the mission and vision will evolve. The structure will evolve. And we have committed to these individuals and organizations that are working with this that we will listen and evolve along with them.
On your wheel that you've provided, you know, you have retail, education, chief, agricultural, et cetera. Do we have any names that are associated with those entities yet?
We do. With each of these sectors, we've looked for a facilitator who would be willing to serve as the initial facilitator to get those groups together and then build a small team of representatives in each of the sectors. I did not bring that list, but we do have a facilitator for each of those sections or segments. We paused slightly in December because our initial structure was to bring together 16 new work groups under each sector. And when we met in December, we realized that would be too cumbersome. There are already groups out there that are doing work in many of these sectors. We need to build collaborative relationships with them so that we don't duplicate and create inefficiencies. So we're going to be revisiting that list of facilitators for each of those 16 sectors and see what's already represented and what isn't.
Would it be fair to say, this is just a curious question for me, right now, since we don't technically have an EDC, we have a coalition forming.
Right.
The only thing we have going, I guess I'm looking at time frames, and I know you're going to have more requests from us, but right now we have our local private citizen investors that are doing a good job, which Susan's small in our department. So right now, that's all we have going on. Would you agree with that?
Right. We have a local group of volunteers, and I remind ourselves of that often. That's why we smiled a little bit when we talked about chair. I remind the group that we're volunteers to also focus on the priorities and the urgencies around this. We're volunteers that really need to continue to work together to form this structure. We're fortunate that the county has stayed close to us as a group, has contributed to conversation, has always been there when we had questions, and they've offered to continue to assist us as we move forward with this transformation. The city is involved as well. Jill Thompson is part of that core group. She is at every one of our meetings that we schedule. She is the representative to the city at this point.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, a change to the EDC is something I've heard about for quite a while, and we had some good progress back in the fall, and kind of slowed down. I just assumed it was maybe elections, holidays, kind of took a backseat. What can we do as commissioners to keep that momentum going, to make sure that you don't get stuck in the bureaucracy of government like I think maybe the EDC got stuck in the past? Is there something that we can do to help facilitate that progress?
I significantly appreciate that offer. I'm not sure that I can respond with a specific bullet point at this time other than the summaries that I've provided. What I would ask for is the patience in allowing us to form. As I said earlier, when you bring a group of diverse individuals together, you have to work through that social experience and you have to work through those diverse perspectives. And to be honest, we slowed a little bit in late November and through December because those different perspectives became a little bit more prominent. Individuals in the group had very good ideas and felt that the structure should move in this way, or we should move at this pace. And we needed time to bring those people together, listen to those diverse perspectives without making people feel like outcasts. So that did slow us a bit. The election really didn't have an influence there, although objectively it could have. I think it was more just this group needed to brainstorm and get through some of those challenging discussions. And I think we have moved through that. We're a stronger group and a more cohesive group because of it.
I would like to make a comment. I thought it was very important for you to come in today for all the questions we just had, that you're not just by the wayside, not doing anything, that you are actively forming this group to benefit Washington County. I'm very happy to hear that and welcome that type of news, because I wish you much success with this committee, because all Washington County benefits from the progress and successes that you have. Any other question I would have, if you have another organizational meeting and any of the commissioners are welcome to attend, or you welcome us, please be sure to invite us, because when I was at the college the other week, your presentation, I couldn't stay for the whole presentation, but it was very informing, so I would welcome that invitation to the board. But again, I thank you for coming in for this update and keeping us abreast and the public that we are working on economic development in Washington County.
Thank you. And that's the last point I'd like to make, is the next step, we're going to be scheduling a work group with the large group. It will probably be in early February, and we would like to extend an invitation to the commissioners to be with us at that work group, either to participate or just to listen and observe to the work that we're doing. That was actually the last bullet point I had.
Jumped the gun on it,
right,
sorry.
right. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
President Klein and Commissioners, I'd also like to remind you that while Michael and the coalition work together, staff here is working very hard. Susan Small is here. She's working very well with the city and the state as well on various prospects and so forth. So this is not a stalemate as far as business development goes here in Washington County with staff. It's simply the coalition is taking time to move forward while all the other gears are turning in Washington County government to get those prospects, and we're having some very good success. So,
Good idea. Thank you. I believe Mr. Goodrich, you're up. Mr. Goodrich, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is still morning, right? Yes, it is. I'm Steve Goodrich from the county's Department of Planning and Zoning. This morning, I'm presenting to you the subject of express approval of the zoning that's proposed to be assigned by the City of Hagerstown upon annexation of certain parcels of land. The properties that are proposed for annexation lie between Antietam Creek, which forms a portion of the city's eastern boundary, and Yale Drive near Hagerstown Community College and the hospital. To help you better locate those parcels, there are maps in the material that you got with your agenda, but to help you, on Eastern Boulevard, if you have seen the cell tower that looks like, that's not very well disguised as a pine tree, that cell tower is located on one of the parcels that is proposed to be annexed. And if you're traveling on Yale Boulevard towards Hagerstown Community College, the area of annexation is between the two new roundabouts to your left if you're going towards the college. The annexation will total about 102 acres. And before we get into the details of that, there are three housekeeping items I want to go over. First of all, there's an incorrect statement in the agenda report form that I want to correct. It says that the right-of-way for Professional Boulevard and the ultimate construction of that portion of Professional Boulevard would be excluded from the annexation. That is not correct. That portion of Professional Boulevard will be included within the boundary. When the annexation goes through, it will be included inside the city limits, but at this time it's proposed that the city would not own the road or build the road. And you will be talking about that subject later on today, but I want to be sure to keep those things separate. That issue doesn't really affect the zoning question that we're going to talk about, but I wanted to correct the statement that portion of Professional Boulevard will be within the city boundary if the annexation goes through. The second item, you have a lot of printed material in your agenda, and I just want to point that out and identify that. You have the report form that summarizes the presentation. You have two packages for cases 1 and 2 they have a cover memo on them that's addressed to me, but then there are attached the resolutions from the City of Hagerstown and the annexation plans for each proposal, as well as several maps of the various parcels that are being included in the annexation. And also in your agenda, you have some zoning comparison charts that are really at the core of what we want to talk about today. One of them is for a conversion from the city's industrial mixed-use zone to the county, or actually it's a conversion from the county's office research and industry zone to the city industrial mixed-use zoning. And then there's a second chart for a conversion from the county's residential transition to the city's agricultural transition. Third housekeeping item, in the context of today's discussion, the word express means that you will express your opinion or state your position specifically on this subject and actually put it into words. In this context, it does not mean, express does not mean that we will hurry through this process to arrive at a decision too quickly or to exclude any of the steps that we need to take. So I just want to make sure that that is clear as well. The law that governs municipal annexations is contained in Maryland's local government article, and it says that after annexation, the municipality, in Hagerstown in this case, the municipality may not allow development on the annexed land with uses that are substantially different. That's an important phrase, substantially different. With uses that are substantially different than would have been allowed in the county zoning without the express approval of the county. And that restriction would last for a period of 5 years from the date of annexation. The best way to determine if the uses in the city and county are substantially different is to compare the zoning in those two jurisdictions. And we believe the best time to do that evaluation is now, before the annexation actually takes place, rather than waiting until there's a development proposal a year or 2 or 3 years from now, and then have to wrestle with this question at that time. I've provided you with the charts that list uses permitted in Hagerstown's industrial mixed use district. And then on that chart next to each use, I've noted if that use is permitted in the county's office research and industry zone. That would be one of those zoning comparison charts that I talked about. And the uses that are allowed in the city but not allowed in the county are highlighted with the yellow shading. My intention in providing that is for you to see for yourself the uses that would not be permitted in the county office research and industry zone, but will be allowed after annexation under the Hagerstown industrial mixed use zone. And that awareness would help you arrive at an opinion about whether the uses allowed in the IMU district are substantially different or are not substantially different, and then to a decision to either grant or not grant the express approval that we're talking about this morning. There are 19 uses identified in that comparison chart by that yellow shading that are allowed in the city zone that are not permitted in the county office research and industry zone. Then there's quite a variety of uses. There are several what we call social assistance uses, like services for the elderly or disabled. There are nursing homes. There are several retail services and products like veterinary services, personal care services, and auto repair and retail sales. And then there's the warehouse use that's allowed in the IMU, and it's not allowed in the office research and industry. We're not making any judgment about the differences and whether one district is better than the other. I'm simply trying to point out the different uses to help you evaluate that substantially different phrase. So if you determine, if you feel like the conclusion that you reach is that there is a substantial difference between the two categories, then you would say that express approval is needed, and therefore it's up to you to decide to grant it or not grant it. In the case of the conversion or the change in zoning from the county's office research and industry to the city's industrial mixed use, that covers 2 properties. There are 4 properties in total. The ORI to IMU change covers 2 properties. That would be the 78 acres that is owned by Meritus Medical Center and the approximately 11-acre parcel that the county owns as a stormwater facility. There are 2 other parcels involved in the annexation, about 12 acres that's referred to as Foggy Bottom Farm. That's where the cell tower is located. That parcel is owned by the city of Hagerstown. And then there's a 1.5-acre parcel that's more or less underwater between the banks of Antietam Creek. Those 2 parcels are going from the county's residential transition to the city's agricultural transition. Between those 2 districts, there's not as many differences, but there are some. Both of them are designed, both of those districts, the RT and the AT, are designed to allow agriculture to continue as well as residential development. But in the city agricultural transition zone, there are some other uses like nurseries and greenhouses and the retail sales of those products and country clubs and golf courses that are allowed in the city district that are not allowed in the county district. So what's before you is, do those differences make those zones substantially different? And if so, then express approval, you need to decide.
You didn't mention, I see the differences here, but unless I missed it, exceptions to these zonings, is that still, that's not substantially different? There's an exception to a zoning like industrial mixed use. There's exceptions to that, I would guess, isn't there, in Hagerstown code?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by exceptions.
Well, every zoning code will have exceptions to it, correct? I mean, there is some exceptions you can appeal and go in.
There's special exceptions, the
Right.
uses that are allowed only after you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get that particular one approved. I did not include those in these lists. Yes, there are special exceptions in the city district and the county district. I didn't include them here because they aren't permitted as a matter of right. They're going to take another step and a judgment by a Board of Zoning Appeals to determine if they're allowed, and we just have no way of knowing.
So with industrial mixed use, if there's special exceptions, it possibly could be approved by the zoning.
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
but that's not considered a substantial difference then.
I didn't include them in
Gotcha.
the substantial differences. That's right.
Thank you.
So,
Steve,
so in
can I ask
summary,
a
I'm
question?
at the end.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. You had mentioned the stormwater management pond. What's the fate of that pond in terms of ownership? And
Well, the county owns the property, and there's no automatic conversion of ownership during annexation, so the county will continue to own that property after annexation unless there's some arrangement to transfer ownership. And that's not part of this discussion, at least the zoning discussion.
That being accurate, there is additional information in that currently with the development of the land, the chief maintains the property for the stormwater management pond for 10 years, then it conveys the maintenance responsibility, I should say, conveys to the county. So the first 10 years is chief maintenance responsibility.
This doesn't seem to me, from looking at, we're sitting here gazing upon Google Earth, doesn't look like it's affecting very many people at all, hardly. I actually had that house, I know that house well, where the cell towers at.
On the property that's being annexed, actually there are no residents except that particular one on the Foggy Bottom Farm, which the city owns.
City must have bought that recently?
Yes,
okay.
yes, they did.
Yeah, because I couldn't sell it, but.
So to pull it all together, Hagerstown is proposing to annex 4 parcels of land. It's a total of 102 acres. The county has the legislative opportunity to review the zoning that will be assigned in the city and form an opinion if the uses that will be permitted in the city are, again, substantially different. And if you conclude that they are, you need to address the question of granting or not granting express approval. And that express approval will remove the 5-year development restriction that would be in place if you did not grant that express approval. The zoning goes from the office research industry in the county to industrial mixed use in the city, and then the other 2 parcels go from residential transition to agricultural transition. Regardless of your decision on substantially different or express approval, that will not prevent the annexation from going ahead. Remember, that approval goes with the approval of the use on the property and the 5-year restriction. I have been informed by city planning staff that the city intends to further modify its industrial mixed-use zone to remove some of those uses that I pointed out that are not allowed in the county district. That hasn't happened yet, but that is their intention to do that in the future. And finally, the City of Hagerstown's public hearing on the annexation will happen on January the 29th. And it would be ideal if we can address this question before that hearing.
Your public hearing's the 29th, so it's pretty much good to go after that.
The city's public hearing is on the 29th.
I would suggest to them that anyone I saw, just suggestion is, I'm an animal lover, but sometimes kennels aren't real popular. You might suggest that to them. It's one to remove.
Okay. There are folks from the city here, so from your mouth to their ears, they've heard that.
Okay.
Okay, I can answer any
Commissioners,
questions. If I didn't cover it, I can answer any questions, or,
Why would we move forward with a vote today before the public has an opportunity to comment?
I think it's just a matter that it affects what would happen in the future, and I think the sooner you can address it, the better.
I think it would affect public comment.
The knowledge of what you've done will be available during the hearing for the citizens to know. That would be an unanswered question during the public hearing that citizens would not know.
Mr. Goodrich, how many different property owners? There's the city.
There's four.
Four. Do we have their consent? Is there opposition from them?
They would not have to give their consent to the county. I don't know. I don't know if there's consent, no consent, in favor, opposed to. That isn't something that we would consider in looking at this zoning question.
We have the consent of property owner forms right here.
I saw something in there that had a tenant support letter.
There is some discussion about contacting the property owners in the package that the city of Hagerstown provided.
Mr. Bachman.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Steve Bachmiller, Hagerstown's Planning Department.
State law does not require that all property owners or all residents consent to the annexation. The requirement is that at least 25% of the residents and also the owners of 25% of the assessed value of the lands to be annexed must consent to the initial petition. From that point, it can move forward. Once it's adopted, there is a provision for referendum amongst the property owners and residents if there's opposition. The city of Hagerstown owns Foggy Bottom Farm, and of these properties, that's about 93% of the assessed value of the lands. Therefore, the city can take and annex additional lands regardless of the property owner's desire or consent surrounding it, and that's what we're doing here. We did not seek the consent of Meritus or the county for the stormwater management pond to bring those in. The area that is in the the Antietam Creek bed is technically not a parcel. It's no man's land. It's not identified as a parcel. It shows up as a gap between the surveys of Foggy Bottom Farm and the adjacent property across the creek. Literally no one owns it. The reason why that's being annexed and it's even being processed as a separate annexation is simply to regularize the city's municipal boundaries, because if the larger tract gets annexed, which is really the target here, we would have this narrow sliver of county jurisdiction jutting into the city, which is just about all creek bed. And our thought is to annex that as well, just to regularize it, but technically nobody owns it.
Commissioners, any more questions?
Steve, how would I go about getting an aerial photo and maybe the other commissioners would like it, I want it. An aerial photo of all of the property owners from Eastern Boulevard to Robinwood and Jefferson to Frederick Street, but more importantly, the dual highway to Jefferson, but I'd like to have it to go all the way over to Frederick Street also.
Okay. There's an aerial photograph in the package that the city provided. It doesn't cover that much of an area. So my staff can provide a photograph like that for you, and we can show the parcels. Are you interested in actual owners?
Yeah, I'd like to know who owns it.
Okay, well, then we can
And
create a
in
map.
addition to that, I'd like to have put together all of the committees that are associated with those parcels. You have the hospital, you have the college, you have the hospital, the college. But anyhow, their committees, I'd like to see the names and the members of all of those committee members also.
Okay.
Also in there, and I think it was in this one, it referenced about a meeting 2014, 2015, I believe. And you had various people meet on this annexation.
That would probably.
I don't think the county, was the county invited, or did they participate in that meeting?
I don't believe so. What happened was the city has identified this area as a desirable area to annex and we wanted to make the transition as smooth as possible. So our comprehensive planner at the time, Alex Rohrbal, who is no longer with the city, he met with Mr. Snook, who I believe he met with as a representative chief, as opposed to
Group 2 for
yeah, as opposed to as a member of this body. I think it was actually after he was off of this body, about amending our IMU zoning district regulations to make it more streamlined with your ORI. A number of changes were proposed. They were recommended by our planning commission and adopted by the mayor and council, and they took effect in early 2015. And the intent was to make our IMU more consistent with your ORI. Are they perfect? No, there's still some inconsistencies, but the intent was to smooth this as much as possible. And as a matter of fact, since this has moved forward, I've had some meetings with representatives, or a representative of Meritus, and they had some questions and concerns about some of the ORI zoning and raised some questions, which we're looking at as for possible additional tweaking of the ORI to give them more of a comfort level for them coming into the city.
I'm going to ask a question again about that stormwater management pond, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I'm just trying to comprehend why that's considered a separate issue as far as the future of that stormwater management pond and whose responsibility it will be to care for it, because there's a cost associated with that. And I certainly understand the city's desire to expand its territory to bring in increased revenues. I understand and I appreciate that. But I wonder if some of the assumptions were made when this property was developed, and it predates my tenure, but that we would have some revenue to pay for that going forward and some revenue to pay for the professional boulevard extension from that property tax revenue. And because of the differential, we'll receive less revenue as that's built out. So why can't that be part of the negotiation and approving express approval?
Well, express approval is designed and focused on zoning and the actual use of the property. And this decision on express approval isn't really a negotiation per se back and forth. The ownership of at least the way the staff is looking at it and presenting it to you, the stormwater pond and professional boulevard is more a matter of public works and public utilities and the management and the ownership, and it doesn't really affect the zoning and the uses that are allowed there, because the stormwater pond is a stormwater pond, and it's not going to be developed with an industrial site or a retail site or anything like that. So that's why we're trying to keep these two things, at least in our presentations, separate, so that you can focus on express approval based strictly on the uses that are allowed in the two different categories, and not have ownership and public utilities sort of color your opinion of those things. That's why we've tried to keep them separate.
I believe the issue of ownership of the pond was discussed within our operation, although I'm not privy to the details. It might be a good conversation to be had between our city engineer, Rodney Tissue, and your chief of public works. What I can do is I can go back from this meeting and mention to them that was specifically raised here, and we can get you some feedback on that pretty quickly.
I'd appreciate that.
I think in the next item, Commissioner, you're also going to hear from the Director of Public Works regarding that pond and the roadway.
Yeah.
But I thought, and maybe I didn't hear you correctly, but I thought if the annexation, once it moves forward, that the city would own that portion of professional court?
No. I wanted to clear up a misstatement in the agenda report form. I said that Professional Boulevard would not be annexed into the city, that the boundary would go out and exclude the road, and that's not correct. When the annexation goes through, that portion will be included in the boundary.
Who owns the part of professional court that is currently already constructed? Who owns that?
The part of professional court on the west side of the Antietam Creek is...
No.
There is no portion of professional that's on the east side of the creek until you get all the way down to
Well, what's the name of the road?
Robinwood Drive. There's a portion at Robinwood Drive of professional court,
Okay, then.
and that's in the
not
county.
Professional, then I'm not talking about professional court. I'm talking about the road that goes from Eastern Boulevard up to where the bridge is going to go across.
That's professional court.
Well, that's already, that part's constructed.
That's constructed.
So who owns that?
The city of Hagerstown.
City of Hagerstown owns that, and it's my understanding that there's some right-of-way conveyance that's actually currently very close to being finalized, that the city will take additional right-of-way from the county for construction up to where the bridge is going to be, is my understanding.
Then how about Eastern Boulevard from Jefferson all the way back to Frederick Street? Is that all the cities?
Eastern Boulevard from,
Jefferson Boulevard back to Frederick Street.
that's all city jurisdiction. But
Well,
it's within the
yes.
city, whether or not the city
Okay.
or owns the road or not, I believe we do. But again, I deal with zoning and planning. The actual ownership of roads and who maintains them, it's a little bit out of my field. So
I just think
it's
that'd
within
be
the city's
important
jurisdiction.
also. That would be important for us to know also.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Move to grant or not grant?
Well, for me, it's not the position to grant or not to grant. For me, I'd like to hear what Andy or Mr. Eshelman has to say, his agenda items next. I know a concern for me is your public comments open until January 29th. So I have a concern there, and as to why we would have to move forward today or not.
Okay.
Can you explain why it'd be beneficial for us to be prior to the public comments, or why, or what our benefit would be, or the problem would be if we waited till after it?
Until after the city's hearing, then the city wouldn't have the benefit of your decision on substantially different and express approval to make a decision on the annexation, to go ahead or to delay it or whatever. They wouldn't have that information.
But at the same time, we don't have the benefit of the public comments from them if we should do it, if they want substantially different or not.
I understand your desire to have feedback from the public. In the regulations that guide this express approval process, we're really focusing on the list of uses in the zoning district and whether they're different or not. And there's no, in that particular decision, there's no
I guess
encouragement to have public input.
I guess my concern of why public input is important is if I'm sitting here and we have people complaining or making comments about these are substantially different or not, to me that's going to sway my decision, because if I have people saying, hey, whatever, nurseries, greenhouses, I don't want that, or country clubs, golf courses, we already talked about kennels, whatever that is, then I could say no, the public has spoken and they don't want this. But if I come back and there's not a single comment on it, then the public has spoken and we're great.
Well, that's your prerogative to wait to make your decision on express approval until you get that feedback. And however you get that feedback, whether you want to have a public comment period, that's going to be up to you.
If I could, to give you a little timeline on the annexation process. The public hearing is going to be on the 29th. Typically, the mayor and council, after a public hearing, will leave a record open for 10 days. Therefore, additional written feedback can be provided for a period thereafter. In this particular case, the intent is to adopt the ordinance of or resolution of annexation at their next available meeting at the end of February, and it would take effect in mid-April. So if folks, typically, I can't speak for the mayor and council, they're under no obligation to keep the record open for 10 days, but typically they do. And that will most likely happen in this case. And if that's the case, if you wanted to wait until after you heard public comment at the public hearing on the 29th, you still would most likely have a 10-day period to submit materials for the record.
Hey, commissioners, what's your thoughts? Want to wait or it's one?
I'm not ready to move forward today.
My suggestion is we wait for public comment.
I think we wait for public comment. Otherwise, that's all for naught.
That's the only thing that's holding me up, and I actually wouldn't expect a lot of public comment or being against this, because the zonings are pretty close. There's a couple weird ones there, but but I don't want to go on record and say I'm all in, and we get 400 people show up complaining about it. And
Is time of the essence for any reason? Is there maybe a project that's?
The city wants to stay on its current planned timeline, which is adoption at the end of February and effective in mid-April. They want to keep the process going. They don't want to delay it, not for any particular, there's no projects that are proposed that we're aware of. This is simply a process to do something the city is intended to do for a while. We've had the opportunity to do it now, and we're moving forward.
I'm hearing the commissioners probably don't want to move forward. If we stayed on to first meeting in February, would that keep the city's timeline moving?
It would be the second, because they want 10 days beyond.
Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah.
Pardon.
I mean, we have a meeting on February, February 12th. If we want to get it put on the agenda then it's giving the time period, it's getting everything, get it on the agenda as quickly as possible.
10 days after January 29th would be February 8th.
And our next meeting would be the 12th, so.
Commissioners, you okay with that solution for today?
Yeah.
Commissioners? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have Andrew Eichelman, Director of Public Works. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. So yes, I'm here to.
Excuse me for a second. Something came to my mind on our last discussion. If there's information to be provided to the commissioners, in addition to what we have here on this annexation request, could we get it a couple of as soon as possible, so that gives us an opportunity to review it, and if we have some questions or concerns, we can go to our staff. Because the information that we were to vote on today for the annexation, we just received this week, and that doesn't give us really enough time to do our due diligence.
I'll double check. I don't believe there's any new materials associated specifically with the issue of zoning. I am going to go back and check the issue of the maintenance of the stormwater management for you, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll get that to you as quickly as I can. But that is a separate, as Steve mentioned, that is a separate issue from the zoning. But I'll get that to you as quickly as I can.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry there, Mr. Eshelman.
Yes, good afternoon. Andrew Eshelman, Director of Public Works. Also here to talk about the city's annexation plan, specifically A 2018-01, which is the 3 properties that total 101 acres of land. The purpose that I'm here to discuss is the public comment period that is in place, as you know, up to the January 29th public meeting that the city's going to have at City Hall. So during the period, we are able to submit comments on the proposed annexation plan, and that's what I'm here to discuss with you. A few items that pertain to future development and maintenance of most notably Professional Boulevard and utilities, as well as the stormwater pond. So as you're aware, the annexation process has been initiated by the city. And while the county supports this annexation and development of the property and the growth of the tax base, I personally have some concerns and belief that the infrastructure within the municipality should be owned and governed by that municipality. As it's presented currently, the future Professional Boulevard from the current boundary, which would include the bridge yet to be constructed over the Antietam Creek, all the way to the edge of the parcel boundary, which is currently owned by Meritus Medical Center. The city's proposing that that future road construction would remain under the maintenance and ownership of the county, that they, while accepting and annexing the parcel, that the future maintenance of that would remain with the county. As far as the stormwater pond parcel goes, we did receive some additional clarification on that. the proposal that was submitted was relatively silent on the future maintenance of that pond. As you're aware, and it was discussed earlier, currently that is being maintained by Chief, ultimately will be conveyed over to the county for maintenance. In clarification from city's attorneys, they are anticipating taking over management of that stormwater pond, although there's nothing more formal than just an email that we have at this point that will occur. So that's also something for discussion to make sure if that is or isn't going to be part of the plan. So I can go into several reasons why we believe it's not in the best interest to keep the portion of road that's going to be built within the county. There's numerous concerns we'd have and benefits, such as when future development would occur, you're no longer just dealing with one jurisdiction, you're now dealing with the county and the city in terms of approval, and that could slow the development process down. There's different ordinances and things in place when it comes to maintenance of facilities such as sidewalks and other improvements, and it just may give conflicting information, not a lot of clarity to future developers, owners about who's responsible for what on that section of roadway. And in the grand scheme of things, we have ended up previously where we've ended up, the county has ended up with these enclaves or sections of roadways in municipalities, and we've tried to be proactive in conveying those back to the municipalities. For confusion's sake, maintenance reasons, you know, if you have a pothole, who repairs that? People tend to think where their dwelling is or where their parcel is, that the road out in front of their house is also being maintained by that same jurisdiction. So with this current path, that would not be the case. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, but my proposal would be I have a draft letter prepared here that Kurt and I have worked on that we could send during the public comment period. As I understand, that's more or less the extent of what we can do, is go on record saying we believe that this is maybe not in the best interest long-term. As far as what they may or may not do with that, it's not really up to us to say. But we are currently in a period of time where we can provide that public comment.
Do we have a copy of that letter yet?
On the other side of the arf.
And the version you're looking at was before we received the information about the pond. I have created an alternate version where we've taken that out. However, because the agreement doesn't really say one way or the other, we could err on the side of caution and keep that in there to make sure that it's part of the public record that we don't believe that this is in the best interest for the county to maintain a regional pond that would not be essentially draining and serving properties that would be within the county's jurisdiction, that would be within the cities.
I agree with the letter, but I would like to take it one step further, and I think we should actually have somebody there at the public hearing on the 29th.
I think Steve and I had discussed that possibility, and this time it's seeking your direction and consensus as to the content of the letter and if that should be sent out at the staff level or the commissioner level. So that's part of the motion and direction here today.
Am I correct that the maps that we have, I mean, we don't control Google satellites, but the maps that we have don't show Yale Drive, the extension between the hospital and the college. Is the parcel of property that we're looking at, does it go to the border of Yale Drive?
It does not, and they used outdated satellite imagery, so if you have other information in front of you, the Meritus property would not include the entire section of Professional Boulevard that is going to connect all the way over to the stub on Yale Drive. The adjacent property would be owned by Chief. So that's part of the concern as well. We always knew that there would need to be some sort of maintenance agreement because the bridge is straddling what is the city and the county. We would need to come up with something as to who's responsible for that. But as far as precedent, while I can't speak for what's going to happen in the future, there's the potential that additional properties would be annexed in, and the same thing could happen that that road network over there, the Yale Drive, Professional, with this trend, it could be that the county ends up maintaining the road network, but then doesn't have jurisdiction over those properties. So up to this point, it's the Meritus property, which doesn't include all of Professional Boulevard to be built.
Yeah, I think you bring up some great points, Andrew. I mean, just in the last few years, we had Pennsylvania Avenue in Hancock, Water Street in Smithsburg, that there's those issues of, you know, who owns it, who maintains it. The citizens are confused, the towns are even confused a little bit. And, you know, if that's the plan going forward to annex more of that property, you know, I'm all in for finishing Professional Drive. So if the city is worried that maybe we're going to stop that once they take over the property, I hope they don't have that concern. I'm in favor of moving forward with it. We have so much already built out. But, you know, the future maintenance, that could get very confusing.
Yes, and in the letter, we've also said that we were willing, in similar circumstances to if it was a developer-built road, that we would offer a maintenance and warranty period so that the city would be, you know, assured that whatever we're turning over to them would be up to standard, that sort of thing. So that's something we'd be willing to discuss, logical terminus points, maintenance agreements, things like that.
Seems to me the elephant in the room is the bridge and the infrastructure for that back in there. That's good. It's going to take forever. Long range, right?
Well, hopefully not. I mean, I can speak to that as well. I was involved in the engineering of that project. We're in the final stages of acquiring all the property that we need. Steve mentioned that there's some property within the city that they need to transfer and turn over to us. We're in the final stages of getting some comments back from different plan review agencies within the city. We have received comments back from Soil Conservation District and others. So we are in the final stages of preparing to start that construction this year with a few housekeeping items. Up to this point, the financial arrangement, at least how it's been budgeted, is that the county would take the lead on the road construction, the bridge to connect over to Yale Drive. That would be what we call phase 1, and that would take approximately 2 years, which would then be followed up by a phase 2 plan to complete the work that was started by the county. And then we have an alternate plan for the city should they choose to enter in an agreement to widen existing professional courts, that we would have a 4-lane roadway from Eastern Boulevard all the way over to Yale. So we have been working with the city for the past 4.5, 5 years on this project and how it's going to be divided.
Why wouldn't that go out to Robinwood?
Yes, so the first 2 phases I talk about.
Been completed from Yale to Robinwood.
Yes, so a portion of Professional Boulevard was built with the Yale Drive construction. So if you go out to that, we'll call it the second roundabout, there's barricades. It goes back there several hundred feet. With what the county's proposing and with the city with the phase that we're currently working on, we'll call phase 1 and 2, that would make the connection from Eastern up to Yale Drive. In your CIP, there's an additional 2 phases, 3 and 4, that would then take it from Yale Drive to the stub that's off of Robinwood. And that's future phases to ultimately make the connection from Eastern to Robinwood.
So that's not even really in the radar anytime soon.
Well, I mean, it's on the planning radar. Scott can speak to what the plan is, but our hope would be that we would have some potential savings from what we have budgeted for these 2 phases, that maybe we could accelerate that last phase, but that's hypothetical in planning at this point.
It's actually in the CIP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very much on the radar, and it's in the CIP.
Not that far.
Yeah, 4 years. Yeah, it's not that far. Unfortunately, the road is expensive, so what we're doing as we get the funding for the projects, starting at the bridge end, moving forward to connect Eastern Boulevard and Yale first, and then continuing to move forward past that roundabout to get over to Robinwood. So it isn't a 4-year plan. It's very much in the CIP to move forward on the project. Yeah. We're just taking it as funding allows us to get it done. An interesting part about this, one of the reasons that, and Greg is here with Chief if he cares to speak to it. But an interesting part about why this pond was built this way was to accommodate the development quickly, streamline the development, so each individual developer or owner wouldn't have to develop their own stormwater necessarily. Again, streamline was the idea. Andrew's point is very much the same, streamline for ownership and approvals and so forth. So what we're looking to do is streamline things. In addition to the examples you gave, there was one in the city called Haven Road, and that was a similar exchange after many, many years of citizens not knowing who served what, and we did finally get that one exchanged after we paved it and brought it up to basically like a new road.
Also, who does when we talk about annexations, and I don't know if this is for you, Andy, or not, but once that property's annexed, then the city's going to be adjoining properties that aren't annexed. Any of the properties that we're going to be adjoining to, do they have an annexation agreement with the city to where once this boundary is defined, all of the bordering neighbors of the new property line, are they going to be forced to annex into the city through an annexation agreement or anything like that?
Does it create a domino?
I think there's others in the room, Jason with Meredith and Greg with Chief. I know normally that comes into play with connection to utilities, so they would probably be better to ask what conversations they've had with pre-annexation agreements.
Yeah, I guess the question is, do we send the draft letter?
I'd like to have one more day on that letter. I missed it. I didn't get a chance to read it, and then you all can decide. I don't know if we need to add anything, or I didn't have a chance to read it.
Commissioners?
The only problem with that is our next regular meeting is the 29th. So, I mean, I would make this, I read over the letter. I'd make this motion that we send the letter, and I would actually like to see staff there at the meeting, because if we don't do it now, it's too late. We won't get the letter.
Okay, that's a motion.
And we still have 10 days to.
Exactly.
Okay, motion to have a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 5-0.
Just to clarify, is this being sent from the commissioner level or staff level?
Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Proposed Building Code Review Committee. Mr. Eichelberger, please. I think we have Frank Quillen with us today. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rich Eichelberger, Director of Construction, also Code Official for Washington County. Have with me today Frank Quillen, who is our Chief Plans Examiner and also Deputy Code Official, and Ashley Holloway, who is now the Director of Plan Review and Permitting. Here today to request to move to approve the formation of the Building Code Review Committee to assist with the review of the 2019 building codes in preparation for local adoption. The 2018 code adoption is required by the state of Maryland, includes state building performance standards and Washington County local amendments. Local amendments allow for some modifications to the new codes to meet local conditions and for consistency and coordination with customers as well as existing and external agencies. The local amendments will be the result of the work of this committee. The state of Maryland is scheduled to adopt the Maryland Building Performance Standards to become effective March 1st, 2019. Local jurisdictions are required to adopt the Maryland Building Performance Standards with local amendments as needed to meet the needs of that jurisdiction within 12 months of the state adoption. The committee will provide a review of the state adopted codes and provide recommendations to the commissioners for final approval. The goal is to complete this process and adoption and implementation by the end of this year. As with prior code cycles, a request is being brought before the board to create a building code review committee. The committee will consist of various government, design, and construction representatives. The purpose of the review is to consider safety, consistency, common sense, and customer service across agencies as it's related to Washington County. A copy of the 2015 review committee members has been provided to demonstrate the diversity of previous members. The plumbing, mechanical, and electrical codes are reviewed by the members of their respective boards. And as you can see from the previous code review committee, it's made up of varied folks within Washington County. And again, we would recommend using this same type of structure, using a Maryland registered architect, structural engineer, mechanical engineer, home builders, and such. Fiscal impact for this committee would be approximately $3,500 for the committee member code books, and have had concurrence from the county administrator. Any questions?
Commissioners, questions, thoughts? Rob?
I'd just like to add a point that is very clear by this, but it's not clear unless you know the background. Back in the last adoption of code, we went to the state and worked very hard to try to get the approval legally to get a 6-year adoption period rather than a 3-year adoption period. The code books are about this. When you add them all together, the various code books are about this thick. The committee Rich is talking about, Frank and Ashley, will go through those code books and look at them for local approvals. The state didn't want to hear any of us extending this to a 6-year cycle. It had full staff support, it had full board support to go to a 6-year cycle. So you may hear some things back from the Home Builders Association. You may hear some, which they're very knowledgeable about this situation. The fact of the matter is these gentlemen and all the staff at 80 West, they're doing only what they're obligated to do. We actually went above and beyond trying to get an extension of the law last year or 3 years ago, and it didn't pan out. So kudos to them for coming in early and trying to get the committee together.
So once the committee is formulated, you'll bring it to us for approval, or do you all go ahead and approve the committee members?
Once we go through our process, and we would be meeting on a fairly regular basis, and then all those would be drafted, sent to the county attorney's office for their review, and then brought before this board for your review, and then also there would have to be a public comment, a public hearing, and that would have to go through all that process, and then eventually come back to the board for final approval with those final adoption dates. So it's pretty aggressive schedule that we would like to attempt to make this process work. We don't expect a lot of major changes this year with this code, so hopefully that'll help our process move along a lot quicker.
You have $3,500, the fiscal impact for committee member code books. How many books will that buy?
Depending on the number of committee members, it would be at least 3 books, because it would be the IBC, IRC, and the energy code. Then for the trade boards, for the electrical board, it would just be the NEC, and for the plumbing and HVAC board, it would be their plumbing code and their HVAC code books.
Okay. Commissioners, thoughts? Any motion to approve the move forward?
I don't know that you need a motion. I guess you can, I mean, obviously you're giving them direction to put together a proposal to form the committee and to come back, and you're going to approve the members. Is that correct?
Is this a consensus then?
Consensus to
I'm
move
good.
forward.
Good to move forward.
Randy's good, I'm good.
Consensus to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
on schedule, COLA step and county step and COLA discussion. Sarah Reeves.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I'm sure everybody's getting hungry.
Birthday cake.
That means you'll be brief, huh?
Good afternoon. I am here to present some information to you today related to our salary scale. Hopefully by the end of this discussion, I can receive some feedback from the commissioners. That is what I'm looking for today. The county has taken time to review the past 12 years of our step and COLA increases. This analysis found that in many years, the county would provide one or the other, but generally not both, a step and a COLA. The step increase for the county scale is currently 3.5%. The historical review has provided that we have given steps in 4 of the past 12 years. COLAs often vary in the percentage that have been issued, but in the past 12 years, we have provided employees with COLAs for 5 of those 12 years. A couple of things happen when we provide one or the other and not both, and that's why I'm here presenting to you today. When steps are issued but no COLA, the scale falls out of alignment with peers because the lowest grade and step never increase. We have seen evidence of this most recently, which is why the county has issued COLAs for the past 3 years. However, when we issue COLAs and we don't issue any steps, we have a difficult situation with employees because we have employees now that have been at the county for 3 years that are still on a step 1. So anyone coming in that fills a position similar to theirs, they will both be paid the same. So the county would like to find an adequate balance between steps and COLAs so that each year, if warranted and if revenues are sufficient, that both a step and a COLA could be issued. This would serve a dual purpose because we would then be rewarding our current employees on a consistent basis, and we would be keeping our scale in alignment so that we wouldn't have as much fluctuation. In order to do this, though, some of the reasons that I think, maybe one or the other has been issued in the past is because maybe the county can't afford to do a 3.5% step and a COLA on top of that. So an idea here would be to reduce steps for the employee scale from 3.5% to 2.5%. This would align with what the Board of Education does. They actually recently changed their salary scale as well. I think, if my memory serves me right, they implemented a 2.5% increase for their steps in 2018. I think that was the first year. Prior to that, they had different steps for different positions. And then, with that, the county currently uses an ad hoc approach for COLAs, both for employees and retirees. So a method that could be looked at would be to use the CPI index for wage. One that's used most commonly for wage escalation agreements would be the urban wage earners and clerical workers one. This is what the Social Security Administration does. And one of the things the county may be interested in doing would be to provide a COLA up to a certain amount, such as 1%, based on the CPI, so that we could create a situation each year where our county employees would be receiving a step and we would be able to provide a COLA to keep the scale in alignment and also to reward employees instead of one or the other. I'm not sure. I don't think my graph is coming up here. I did have a graph, but it is included in your packet. If you see this.
What is that? Can I interrupt just for a second, just to get on the same page?
Sure.
So the cost of living COLA, it would benefit a whole lot more
The
county.
The
would-
cost of living COLA, the COLA affects the entire scale.
Right.
So whether we issue a step or a COLA, it affects everyone, okay?
It
So if
helps
we-
more employees with the COLA than if we reduce the step, and it would help more employees. Would that be an accurate statement, or just put the scale in line?
No, I think that, I mean, if the percentage is the same, I mean, a lot of times, you know, we've had a COLA of 3.5%, which is the same as our step. So it really depends what percent COLA you're giving, because certainly a 5% COLA employees would favor over a 3.5% step, possibly. But what happens when we continue to issue COLAs and no steps is that we have brand new employees coming to the county making the same as someone that's been
Gotcha,
here for 3
gotcha.
years.
Okay.
So it's good to have both. There are a few graphs in front of you now. You can see, and I've just done this to try to illustrate the intent behind the conversation today. So we can see the historical growth, you know, what we've done for steps and COLAs. You can see, you know, most of the time, and this is a, you know, growing chart compounding. So you can see a lot of the time it was one or the other. And then what our vision for the future would be is to try to bring those into alignment and provide both at the same time. But what I'd like from you today is for your thoughts on this idea. I'd like to know what you think and maybe give some direction if you think things are fine the way they are, if you think that there could be improvement.
Well, the graph sort of explained it to me that your fear or concern is COLAs will outweigh steps, and is that pretty much a summary?
Well, yeah, I mean, over the last 12 years, we've only had 4 years where we've had steps. So, you know, you can have an employee that's been here for 8 years but not on step 8. So that's something that the Board of Education does really well. They are consistent and they provide steps to their employees each year, generally. I think there might have been one in the past 12 years that they did not due to the recession. And so that's what we're looking to do.
There was also some, I'm sorry, sir.
This also benefits the future liability calculations of the pension, because if we have a consistent COLA, we're going that we can actually understand what the future liability would be on our pension.
It would provide a better projection. Right now, there is no COLA in our pension liability for retirees being calculated. Our pension plan does already have built in a 3.5% increase. So if steps were reduced to 2.5% for current employees and we issued a COLA on top of that, what we have provided is already sufficient from that respect. The retirees would maybe be a different conversation as far as how we plan for that. But yes, it would provide for better planning.
That's your suggestion?
I can support this because of what we can see has happened in the past. I can support but the hope behind it is that it would happen every year. So, you know, not 1 year we don't issue steps. Like, we would really try to make this an initiative for the county to be consistently providing steps to our employees and looking at COLAs.
My only difficulty with saying, hey, I'm going to give everybody a 2.5% raise every single year, is it, you know, it's not, doesn't always be merit based. And we're giving a 2.5% raise, and in the private sector, guaranteeing a raise is very, very difficult.
There actually is a point where the vision for having a COLA and a step combined is more beneficial to that, where if a COLA is issued and the step is not achieved based on the review analysis for that each employee goes through, they would still receive a COLA if the economy and the determining factors, CPI, whatever it is, says that we can do that. They could issue a COLA could be across the board and should be to keep the wages where they should be, but then the step wouldn't necessarily be a guarantee. So it does offer you, right now it's a 3.5 or nothing, and then we've tried to make up for it over time with last year it was a 5%, and then before it was a 5%. This would keep us, with your concern as well, it would help us address mitigating that from 0 to everything. It would give us more flexibility in review processes and so forth.
So what's your suggestion, Rob, what I just heard you saying, what that would, fiscal impact to the county is not that huge, I mean, to do this, correct? No different from,
It's going to be consistent.
right.
And
I mean, we ran some rough numbers. I mean, the fiscal impact to the county will change every year based on, you know, what people are being paid in that year. Because certainly a 2.5% increase would be more, you know, next year if we had already issued one this year. But, you know, I did run some quick numbers. You know, if we would stay on the current scale that we have, which is the 3.5% scale, it would cost the county very similar to moving to the new scale. You can see under fiscal impact to move employees to the new scale, and then to provide a 2.5% step would cost approximately $2.7 million. To provide employees a 3.5% step, it would cost $2.1 million. So there is a difference there of moving to the new scale.
Yeah, and help me through this question. I got a million questions. Sorry, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that, how does that? I mean, my concern is that never want to affect the morale of the employees. Does that make sense? Do they think they're getting less of a raise by doing this if you're not on a step, just on a cost of living?
Maybe it could be a concern.
There's definitely two ways to look at it, in that at 2.5, the numbers are what they are. 2.5 is less than 3.5. But if you look at the history, which Sarah's pointed out, over the past, 10 years?
12-year history I did.
Over the past 12-year history, while 3.5 sounds better, 3.5 has actually been issued how many years?
4 times.
4.
4 times out of those 12 years. And overall, I mean, if you ran an average, it's averaging about 3% between steps and COLAs, which is not far different from what the suggestion is here, to provide the 2.5 and the COLA of up to 1%. So that's something to consider.
Sarah, you provided to us several months ago a chart that was very helpful that shows the history of the county's wage and step increase, and I think you were referring to it, along with maybe the Board of Ed, State of Maryland, maybe a neighboring county. Could you plug in a hypothetical of this scenario if we adopted that back at the start of your data, where we would be today?
Yes, I could. And if each year we did give a 2.5% with a 1% COLA, we certainly would be at an average of 3.5%, which is higher than I think where we are today.
So could you, I think it gave like a generic salary of $30,000 or $50,000. And then today's value of what that salary would be.
Sure, I can do that for you and provide that to you.
Instead of putting just the 1% COLA, could you actually go back and get the CPI of what it was that year so we could get a better picture of what the CPI, because there was a couple years that the CPI would have been 0.
That's true. Yes, that's true. There are also a couple years where the CPI would certainly exceed the 1%.
Exactly.
So, which, you know, and that's where it comes into, you know, what could the county afford? And, you know, we wouldn't be comfortable with going above 1%.
We wanted to have a ceiling on that CPI because some years it can be incredibly large, and you're going on data that's sometimes a year old. So you may be, we talked about this, you may be increasing in a year that's not looking so good based on historically the past year. So.
Yeah, I guess my concern was morale of the county. I mean, I just make it so, you know, presented. It needs to be presented that the county employees understand what we're doing. You know, it's like Rob just said, you go in there and say, no, it's 2.5, not 3.5. Okay, they just cut my wages. Well, you know, you understand what I'm saying?
I understand fully. I mean, we are county employees as well, and so the difference is significant. If we could guarantee a 3.5, and that's the discussion Sarah and I have had, can we legitimately say that a 3.5 is viable year after year after year after year? And it's very hard to project and forecast 3.5. 2.5 is what it is, but it's consistent with our comrades. It's more consistent with a steady growth, as you can see by the graph. I think we have a much better opportunity to tell the staff that you would have a much better opportunity to get this 2.5 regularly versus a 3.5, which you may not get each year.
I agree. I agree. I mean, it means a more steady, they know what to expect, and it's not a pay cut.
Right. The other thing that came out after going through the study, the salary study that was done over the last year, is that it showed how disparaging our wages had become for some portions, and the fact that a person hired today versus a person hired 4 years ago make the same wage, despite 4 years of experience with the county. And that, we've heard that a number of times from various staff members, that that's a concern. That's why the 2.5 and the 1%, according to the study, according to the data, looks like the best thing to do, most pragmatic, should I say.
And I would just like to correct myself for the record. I think I added under fiscal impact wrong when I verbally said it. You know, the idea of moving employees to a 2.5% step scale would cost about $2.2 million, and the 3.5% step would be $2.1 million. So it's actually very close. So sorry, I misspoke. My math was wrong in my brain, but it's correct on your ARF.
Commissioners, comments, consensus, what would you like to do?
I think it's a good idea, but I do think if we had the data so the employees can see is, hey, this is what actually happened 12 years ago, and this is what 2.5% plus what the actual CPI was up to 1%. Because if the CPI comes in at 0.5, you're not getting a 3.5% raise.
Correct.
You're getting a 3, and if it comes in at 0, it's only at 2.5. I think that would be good to see.
Can we wait and get that data before we, would that be okay?
Yeah.
I understand the steps, but we're only going to, regardless of how we give pay raises, we're only going to be able to provide what we can afford anyhow.
Well, I think the purpose, pardon me, I think you're correct. We're just trying to demonstrate to the employees, we're doing our diligence to find the most reasonable way to give them the money for working for the county. I think, would you not say that's what we're doing? Getting all the information to make the best decision. So if you can bring that information in, we'll get that back in, excuse me, back in and in front of us.
I appreciate the feedback.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Seeing nothing else on our agenda.